Danielle Smith, guest hosting for Common Sense Calgary. We are doing a series of interviews with candidates for Calgary City Council for the upcoming municipal election. I am joined now by your Ward 11 candidate, Rob Ward. Rob, thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
So let's begin just by asking what your passion is. What is it that drew you to public service right now?
Well, I've worked in many industries in Calgary. I'm a lifelong Calgarian. I've lived here in Ward 11 for about the last 10 years now. And working in several industries in Calgary, I've kind of seen how Calgary is struggling right now, obviously, both with our large corporations, our small businesses, and even our residents. It's tough times in Calgary, and I basically want to be part of the solution to help Calgary basically flourish again. So I want to represent the citizens of Ward 11 to have their voice heard at council. I don't represent any groups or special interests or anything like that. I'm the guy for the people, essentially. I want to represent the residents of Ward 11, and that's all, and just help bring Calgary back, essentially, to more of the glory days. I mean, I don't know if it'll ever be quite the same, but we got to get on that path to recovery, and very soon.
We can only hope.
Yes.
Let's talk a bit about your business experience. So tie that together for us. What kind of things have you done in your business life that you think will make you a good counselor?
For sure. So I was a SAIT student. I started in computer engineering. I then went on to business with a major in marketing and finished my degree at the U of L. Some of that was at the Calgary campus. So a degree in management with a marketing major. And out of university, I've worked for nonprofits. I've worked in the nonprofits, mainly in marketing. In the energy sector, I worked as a financial analyst working in business development. So we would work on, tender bids for tenders around the world, essentially. And then after that, I mainly worked in automotive industry, and then I started my own IT and marketing consulting company. So that's my most recent endeavor, and I work mainly with small businesses in Calgary, in every sector. Basically, you can name it. I've worked with dental offices, medical offices, fitness facilities, small businesses like barbershops and salons. So I'm quite connected with the small business community. I understand their struggle. I've seen their struggle. And that's how I've kind of got interested in all this, was being so close with these people and seeing their struggle. It was very personal for me. So I wanted to help, and that's my experience. And that's, again, further as to why I decided to throw my hat in the race.
So, so let's begin by telling me a little more about what you're hearing in the ward. What are people of Ward 11 telling you are the three top priorities?
I mean, the biggest thing is, infrastructure, taxes, and safety are the big three. More as it relates to services and taxes. People are saying, my street isn't plowed properly. There's potholes everywhere. The sidewalks are cracking. So I think what people are really concerned about in this ward are the core services. Are we doing as good of a job as we can with just the core services? We hear a lot of talk about projects and ideas and all these big capital projects, but we're not nailing the very basics first. And that's people's biggest concern. And it shows. Even the city of Calgary has recently done surveys of citizen satisfaction, and the trust in the city of Calgary is at 43%. The approval rating for city council is at 47%. And, less than a quarter of people think that our politicians at the city level care what they think. Less than a quarter. So that's concerning. And people they want that focus on let's do what we have good first, and then let's focus on expanding from there. So that's the biggest thing I've heard for sure, is let's get the basics right and let's work from there.
Let's talk about Jeremy Farkas was the representative for that area. He's now running for mayor. When you look at his record of the 4 years there, do you think he had the right priorities, or would you have done things differently?
I absolutely respect Jeremy Farkas's stance on, the budget and fiscal responsibility. And I've even heard from people in the community, even those who don't necessarily approve of Jeremy, they respect his engagement with the community and how he did listen and take the time with people. So, yeah, I'd say in terms of his policy and ideas around budgets and stuff like that, I think he's done a good job. He's a good advocate for that. I'd say the only thing that I'd work on with him is his ability to kind of work collaboratively with his fellow council mates and city administration and all that. I think unfortunately people see him as sort of a rougher image, maybe harder to work with and communicate with. That's the only thing I'd change with Jeremy. I respect the heck out of what he's done. I think he's engaged with the community, and that's number one. If you're not listening to the people, then you're not really representing them, right? So I think he's done very well with that.
Let's talk about how you would approach that differently, because there's sort of two relationships I want to ask you about. One is, you've already mentioned you're not running with anyone else or as a part of any group, but so you are running as an independent, but you still have to be able to get 8 votes to get your agenda passed through. What are some of can you give an example of how you might approach that differently?
Well, the biggest thing is, it's like anything in life or in business or anything, is you need to get buy-in and you need to get everybody pulling on the same rope. And the best way to do that is, if you disagree with somebody, that's fine. You can, but there's a way to be respectful about it. And there's a way to portray your side of your thinking or your argument with evidence and data. And it's very hard to deny facts and data. So that would be what would drive me in. As you say, I'm one vote. So I can put forward a motion tomorrow, and if everybody hates me or everybody disagrees with me, what have I achieved at the end of the day? Nothing.
Let's talk about the role of administration and council, because I think one of your predecessor's issues was that he felt a lot more decisions should be driven by council, whereas there is another view, which is a lot of the decisions are driven by administration, and then the council acts as a bit of a check on administration's initiatives. How do you see it? What would you think the balance should be?
Yeah, I mean, council, as I said, collaborative. Everybody should be a part of everything that shapes our city. I mean, a recent example of this is the guidebook. Just talking with citizens in Ward 11, even to this day, after as much as it's been in the media, I'd say 10% of the people I talk to even know what it is. And of those 10%, how well do they understand it? Even less. So, with council and administration, we would all need to work together. There can't be this top-down communication where it's just like, we've done all the work here, vote on it. No, there needs to be that back and forth to make sure everyone, including council, including residents, everyone's voice is heard, and it's a collaborative effort. There's no surprises. And, if everybody's informed and brought into the process early enough, then things will get done actually quicker rather than what we've just seen. Now we have to go back and redo work. So
yeah, let's talk about that, because the administration will say, oh, we've been working on this for a decade, but you're quite right. The first time most people have heard about it is in the last month, and now it looks like it could completely transform their communities. So these issues of development are going to be a lot of what you would have to deal with if you get elected. And there seems to be this tension between, do you densify and grow up and have multifamily housing in existing communities with existing infrastructure, or do you allow for greenfield development and grow out? I think at the heart of both of those decisions are issues of affordability. Do you help make more single family homes available to new young families, or do you help to provide more multifamily housing in dense neighborhoods to help those with low income? So tell me how you see that. What is your priority? Is it building out? Is it building up? And how do you address the affordability aspect?
it's a super complex issue, I'm sure, as you know. The problem with growing out is inevitably somebody has to pay for that. So when we build a new community on the outskirts of Calgary, they need, obviously the developers are going to pay for things like the roads in the community and stuff like that. But those roads need to be connected to, let's say, Deerfoot Trail or McLeod Trail. So there's a cost there. We have to build a fire station. There's a cost there. So if we're going to build out, we need to make sure that things are paid for and that the rest of the city, say inner city people, don't have to pay the taxes to make that happen. So I'm not opposed to growing out, but it needs to be done responsibly, and we need to make sure the money's there and everything's paid for. On the other side of that, I'm not completely opposed to densification either. I live in Willow Park, and so that's one of the communities that is heavily slated for this replanning, redevelopment. And I can tell you by talking from people in Willow Park, Maple Ridge, Acadia, these kinds of places, they moved here for a reason. They like the community, they like the green spaces, they like the close amenities. I mean, in Willow Park, South Center Mall, Willow Park Village is right there, the library's right there. It's a great community and people love it. Now, are people opposed to putting in density, multifamily dwellings? No, they're not. But they just want to be consulted and understand, where is this going to go? How is this going to affect me? Can our schools take in these new families? It's genuine concerns. Nobody's saying absolutely not, never. They just want to be consulted and understand what's going on, and I think that's totally fair.
You know, one person who I've interviewed said that multifamily would be supportive if it's in the right place. That every community probably has a natural, smart place to do that densification. Would you observe that too? Because you've got a lot of, I would bet, R1 zoning in your ward.
Big time. You're absolutely right. Now, that being said, we do have more dense living. If you look on the south side of Willow Park, which is right across from South Center Mall, tons of townhouses and little apartments there. They work great, and they're in a great location. They half of them back onto the golf course, which is beautiful. And in the northwest corner of Willow Park, closer to Bonaventure Drive and Southland Drive, there's density there too, and it works very well. And again, nobody's opposed to it because it's in the right place, and the residents themselves are happy because it's very close to amenities. You know, sometimes not all of these people have cars. It's right by the LRT, it's right by the mall, and it's right by shopping plazas and grocery stores. So it can be done properly. And people are just worried, right? They want to see this done properly, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, you know, it would be a good problem to have that we have so many people flocking here that we have to do a lot of new residential development. And it sounds like you're really hoping to be a catalyst for bringing in some of that vibrancy. So let's talk a bit about the Calgary economy. What do you think the priorities should be? What do you think council can do to stimulate some of that new activity?
Well, we need to make Calgary an attractive place for businesses to come in, and even people within the city itself to start their businesses. As we know, there's been a tax shift from the core of downtown to residents and businesses outside of downtown. And it's hard, right? These are small businesses, especially right now, even before right now, but especially right now. They've been open and closed, they've had restrictions, and even without restrictions, not everybody's comfortable going to the businesses. So they've been hurt. There's no question about it. So any way that we can help out at City Council with budgeting to increase the tax load on these businesses and to attract other businesses is going to help. And that's extremely important. The other thing I would say is we can't be picky. We can't be choosy on what types of businesses we want. As much as some people don't like it, the energy industry, the energy sector is an extremely important part of Calgary. They contribute to our tax base in Calgary and Alberta and Canada. They employ thousands, I think tens of thousands, possibly even hundreds of thousands of people, and they support our community, most importantly. Think of your children's sports team. Who's donating jerseys? Who's donating food? Who's, all this stuff. So I think, I worked with nonprofits in the past. I work with nonprofits now on a volunteer basis, and they're hurting badly. So anything we can do to support business in Calgary, it is huge. And yeah, we need to do that.
Let's then talk. So you've talked about the tax side of things.
Yeah.
Let's. I'll ask one more question there, because oftentimes this issue gets framed as a revenue problem as opposed to a spending problem. We've heard proposals in the past for new taxation powers for the cities, but it's been advanced by municipalities, municipal associations, or the charter city discussion, or even the report that came out last year. What's your view? Does Calgary need new tax powers?
No, we need to get our budget in check. Yeah, taxing more people with new creative tax ideas. People have had enough. The thing that's scary to me is in a year where there was a pandemic, and the number I believe is around 40% of people in Calgary who were employed pre-COVID have either lost their job or lost income. We don't need to worry about taxing people more. We need to get our budget in check and give people a break, because even this year the tax rate went up. And if the tax rate goes up in a year like this, is it ever going to stop? It's scary.
It's a great point. Let's talk then about the spending side, because you've already talked about your focus on core services, but give me some sense of how you would approach that issue. So do you think the spending is about right and just needs to be maintained? Do you think that it should continue to grow with the growth in the city and the growth in revenue? Or do you think that they actually do need to find places to cut?
There needs to be efficiencies found, first of all. So we need to look at every department. Are we doing this as efficiently as we can? Is there a way to implement new processes or perhaps technology to make things more efficient? I look at the snow clearing, and this isn't just me. This is people I've talked to in the ward, and they've said, I see the plow go down Acadia Drive 5, 6, 7, 8 times. The road's already bare. So could we not implement some sort of a GPS system that would say, hey, this road's already been done. Why don't you go to that side street? Something like that.
Do you know what's so weird? So many candidates have said that. So it's happening in every part of the city. The main roads are getting done multiple times, and the side streets aren't getting done at all.
Yeah, I have family up in the Northwest in the Hamptons area. Same thing. He says my street, and he lives on a side street. His side street has been done 5, 6 times when we had that big snowstorm, yet other streets haven't been touched at all. So there's a great example. Are we doing that as well as we can? So let's look for efficiencies. Let's use technology to make things more cost effective. In terms of should we be spending more on these things? Clearing the streets costs money. First step is to look for efficiencies. If that works, great. We don't have to spend more. But if we find out we do need to spend a little bit more, then we need to look at where is our money being spent that would be better spent on focusing on these core services. Go ahead.
What about the issue of contracting out or private sector involvement? Because there is a proposal to have a portion of garbage collection done by the private sector or golf courses run by the private sector. Do you see that as part of the solution too?
Absolutely, 100%. And I know that the waste, they're doing trials with privatization in some communities. I'd be very, very interested to see how that goes. Is there a decline in service quality at a lower cost? If not, then there's a great way to save some money. I'm a huge golf guy. It's my passion. The city golf courses, they need to look at being privately run. For example, Maple Ridge Shaganapie Golf Course, that tee sheet is always full. So the fact that that course is not turning a profit, Shaganapie is turning a profit, but Maple Ridge, surely we can do better. Even when you look at their costs compared to even the private course across the street are quite high, and they shouldn't be. So there's efficiencies to be found there for sure. And people love the green space, they love the golf course itself. So don't just sell it for development, but can it be run better? Surely it can.
So this gets into the thorny issue of having most of the services provided by the city being run by unionized workforces.
Yeah.
And we also know from some of the work that's been done by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation that they are offered at a premium, and you just gave an example. So how do How would you manage that? Because one of the biggest cost items for the operating side is wages and benefits and pensions for your frontline workers. Do you think that there's an approach that you can take that would help bring those either down or maintain the level so that it's not growing beyond the capacity to pay?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing that we need to look at, I think, right away is I would suggest a hiring freeze right away. So, positions that already exist, sure, we need those jobs filled to get things done. But for me, a hiring freeze while we do basically a corporate structure evaluation. Is there room to save money here? Is everything necessary that we have in place? So just a long, hard look at the expenses of salaries, of benefits, of pensions. Yes, definitely, that needs to be looked in. As a candidate, I don't have all the completely detailed information, but that's something I would push for extremely heavily. As I've said in my other responses to you here, efficiencies need to be found. It's just too easy to not want to do the work, to do the digging, and just keep raising salaries, and eventually it has to get under control.
Right. And I mention this because it is Jeremy Farkas who kind of pioneered the approach of being the first to take the leadership to give the credibility to ask the same of the public service. So he turned down the pension, turned down the severance pay, wanted to see a rollback in council salaries. Give me your basic approach on that. Do you think council is compensated fairly, or do you think that there's some room for a reduction there?
I think they're compensated more than fairly. For me, I'm not. This is blunt, but I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this for the Ward 11 residents. So would I agree to not taking the pension? Absolutely. Would I agree to, I don't know, a 10% pay cut? Well, sure. Because if I'm going to say that the city needs to cut 10% of positions or cut pay by 10%, I'm not going to tell them to do that if I'm not willing to do that myself. So absolutely, we need to get it under control, and sacrifices need to be made by everybody. So I would turn down the pension. I would turn down a transition allowance. I would take a pay cut, absolutely, because it's not about me. It's about the residents of Calgary, the residents of Ward 11.
All right, let's talk then about, we talked a lot about operating. Let's talk about capital. A lot of big ticket items that are on the agenda. Let's begin with the Green Line, because I think it started off as a project with a lot of buy-in, 40 kilometers. It was going to be $4.5 billion, funded by 3 levels of government, extend all the way to the far south and also to the far north. And what we have today is a project that's going to cost more, $5.5 billion, and it extends to neither. So, and also you've got the transportation minister weighing in, saying it doesn't even connect in to the existing LRT system. So he doesn't like the plan. What would you do if that lands on your desk if you get elected in October?
I've heard a lot of concerns. I actually had a good chat with an engineer the other day, and we were discussing the tunnel under the river, and he said the risk of that is like insane. He would never do that. And this is, these are intelligent people, very smart people, so I trust their opinion. And yeah, with the Green Line, there's many facets to that. One is people say, oh, well, we're getting money from the province and the feds. What people don't seem to think of is that's your money too. It's 3 different accounts. It's your checking account, your savings account, and your housing account. That's still your money. So do you think that that is the absolute best way to spend your money right now? Transit ridership is down 51%. We're in a pandemic, so fair. But Calgary Transit themselves have surveyed residents in Calgary that use transit and said, hey, when the pandemic's over and things are back to normal, are you still going to use transit? 33% say they probably wouldn't. So the 33% decrease in ridership, even post-pandemic. So for me, the Green Line, first of all, I think it's somewhat contradictory because it's in my ward, it's going to go to Quarry Park and Douglasdale. And as we know, Quarry Park is kind of rebirthed as a business hub. Some big companies from downtown have moved there. Now, the purpose of the guidebook is to say that we should be working, living, and playing in our communities. So why are we building infrastructure to take us out of our communities to go to work. It's somewhat contradictory. So I don't love the idea of the Green Line right now for the reasons of the cost is huge. It keeps changing. I think faith in the project, trust in the project has wavered. And I would rather see the money put towards the existing transit. So for example, if we use buses, we can be much more flexible with their routing, with their scheduling, as opposed to something that is cemented into the ground. And even talking with residents of Ward 11, they want to see the existing transit be more desirable first. I've talked to seniors and they say, back to clearing roads, it's dangerous to get onto the bus because there's a pile of snow right in front of the bus stop. There's no benches for them to sit on at a lot of these places. There's no washrooms for them to use at the train station sometimes. So let's make transit desirable first. And then maybe we can come back to this discussion much later down the road, because as we've seen, there's not there's no sign of going back to ridership levels as they have been in the past anytime soon.
Great points. Let's then talk about the other big four capital projects. So the event center that is being built in conjunction with the Calgary Flames, the BMO Center expansion for the convention center space, the Arts Commons transformation for our theater world, and the Foothills Fieldhouse. Now, when City voted to approve these projects, they did so against the advice of the city's chief financial officer, who said they couldn't afford all of them at the same time, but they went ahead anyway. Do you think that was the right move?
No, absolutely not. And this is convenience of situation, hindsight. But look at the Flames arena project now. It's rumored to have twice the number of suites in it. And who buys suites? Corporations, businesses. Who's going to fill those suites now? Calgary is hurting badly, and the timing just couldn't be worse, in my opinion. Hopefully that's all right, but in my opinion, funding a private thing, there is benefits for the city. And the first proposal that was on the table was, in my opinion, terrible. The second proposal, better. There is a path perhaps to making our money back with that proposal, with the property taxes for businesses that are near or in the arena or the event center, and the ticket kickbacks and stuff like that. It's a long path to make that money back, and at this time, as I've said over and over, we're hurting so badly right now that I just don't feel it's the right time. The event center, the BMO expansion and the Arts Common and the Field House, I think there's bigger priorities right now.
Well, let me ask you this a different way then. If you had only been able to choose one, what one do you think would have been the most important to do?
Oh, that is a hard question. I think I would go with the arena, just for the reason that it's easier to get your funds back eventually.
Okay.
And it does rejuvenate the downtown. There's no question about that. And there's the side benefits of the Calgary Flames are going to kick back money into the community with sports funds and things like that. There hasn't been as much communication about benefit to the community with those other projects. So that's why if I had to pick one, I'd pick the arena.
All right, let's talk then a bit about subsidies, because the approach has been to identify money, and in this case, $100 million to set aside for Calgary Economic Development Authority to try to attract particular businesses. Do you support that general approach?
Well, we want to attract businesses to Calgary for sure. How are they going to use that money is what I would question. Are they going to the businesses that they want? Is there some bias in who they're attracting and how they're spending that money? That's what I would question. I don't know. I just don't know what the motivation would be for them in terms of who they're attracting and how they're attracting. So consulting more with the business community through city council, city administration, perhaps would be better. It's hard to say. There's just not enough information about that. I wouldn't.
Okay. Well, we've talked already about snow removal and privatization, so thank you for that. Let me ask you a few other questions just to wrap things up. The public art programs, given Calgary a bunch of black eyes. I think we think of the Blue Ring and the Beaufort Towers and the Poop Palace. I don't know which is your favorite black eye, but do you think that they have changed the program in a way that you're satisfied, or do you think more work needs to be done there?
More work needs to be done.
What would you like to see?
I would like to see the art fund basically wiped. I mean, there's bigger priorities right now. These structures are they're not icons of Calgary. The only icon we've sort of seen was that Peace Bridge, which is nice, but it has its issues in itself, and it has costs that keep coming up. I don't know if we remember when the glass was broken. Well, that wasn't pretty. That was expensive, and it had to be imported and all these things. So the art budget, I understand the value of art in creating, a beautiful city and all that, but we have bigger priorities right now. So,
all right, let me ask you, because you seem to be very focused on core services. So let me ask you about our frontline services, our first responders. So first of all, police. There was a defund the police movement, which turned into identifying a portion of the police budget that could be reallocated to other social agencies to respond to mental health and addiction calls. Do you support that move?
There's two sides to that question. Do I support defunding of the police? No, I don't. Do I support allocation of resources in a better way? Absolutely, of course. Mental health is a very serious thing. Are people better trained to deal with that than our police officers? Probably. So, yeah, I mean, allocating budget to better serve, mental health responses and calls, for sure. Simply defunding the police, though, no, I do not support that.
Okay, let's talk about a fire for a minute, because I think what we found with the dispute that the city had with the province over centralized EMS, there's sort of two ways of looking at that. One of the first things we discovered, though, is that there are a lot of calls that fire end up going to that are medical calls. And so that was one of the reasons why they wanted to maintain dispatch. But it does sort of raise questions about how our fire resources are being used, especially since we're being told new communities can't be built because we don't have enough frontline firefighting capacity. How would you address those various problems?
I mean, with the movement of the call center and the response, we need to look at that. Is there valid complaints? Have response times increased? And if so, we need to make changes, because this is, when talking to the residents and even in citizen surveys, one of the biggest things people are concerned about is safety. Police, fire, EMS. And then I think we can all agree that that's a very important thing. So yeah, that's one of the things, I talk about saving money on core services, but at the same time, that is the most basic of needs. Is my house is on fire and I need a firefighter. I'm having a heart attack and I need an ambulance. There's somebody in my house with a gun. So those sorts of things are extremely important. The residents agree. So let's make sure that we're getting to these people on time with the right resources as quickly as we can.
All right. Let's talk about the issue of, there's going to be a couple of other issues coming forward in the fall election. One in particular, fluoride, has been put to a public referendum. We had a referendum in the past on the issue of the Olympics, but council chose not to have a referendum on the issue of reducing speed limits to 40 kilometers per hour in residential areas. Do you think they made the right decisions on both those hot button issues?
On the fluoride, putting it to the public vote I think it's the right decision. And as we know, those votes are non-binding. So I would support the outcome of that vote regardless as to what it was. So I think that was the right decision. The one thing I would say is I hope that after this vote, that's it. Can we please decide in or out?
Fluoride aside. But the question being, how often do you go to the public with issues to get their direct input on? And so give me an alternative answer on the issue of the 40 kilometer per hour speed limit. Should that have gone to a public vote, or do you feel like you would have had enough information to make a decision as an elected council member?
I do have enough information on that. I actually did some extremely in-depth research on that. And In Ward 11, the number of accidents that occurred on roads that will now change to 40 is, I think it's like 15% or less than that. So with these changes, we have affected accidents in the 15% range. So, 15 is better than zero, but 15% for such a large change with costs attached to it, I don't think that you've tackled the root of the problem. I mean, distracted driving is cause for 33% of accidents. That's more than 15%. So a more effective sort of way to prevent pedestrian deaths would have been cracking down on distracted driving.
All right. Let me ask one final question, because there's always a balancing act where you have to consider the interests of the constituents in your own ward and the interests of the city as a whole. So what would happen if that was in conflict? What would happen if the city administration, for instance, was recommending something for the city as a whole, but your constituents had a different view on that? How would you fall on an issue like that? How would you strive to get to a resolution so that you could cast your vote?
Oh, that's a tough question. I represent the citizens of Ward 11, so I would request their input on anything that goes to council. I'm not the mayor. That being said, I do understand that my decisions and my votes do affect all citizens of Calgary. I'm going to side more with my community, but I'm more than willing to hear input from all sides. So I find that our ward here in Ward 11 is generally in line with the larger majority of the city, but there could be a case where that's not the case. So first of all, I'm going to listen to my constituents in Ward 11. Their opinion is what matters most. That's who I was voted in to represent. So that's number one. That being said, I'm not going to ignore people from other areas of the city. Their input matters too, because I'm voting on something that will affect them as well. So there's a balance there. There's definitely you have to represent your constituents first, but willing to take input from everybody.
All right. Thanks so much for the conversation. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you.
You got it. That's Rob Ward. He is your candidate for Ward 11.